From the trails to the road to the track, if it's running, you'll find it right here on Trail Tales ARP. Run wild. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Trail Tales ARP, a running podcast. I am your host, Sean Sobon. Today, I have Steve Kenny with me, and we're going to talk about the Big Run 3.0. What is the Big Run 3.0? Well, you're about to find out. Steve just spent a few weeks out on the Bruce Trail and did an end-to-end running roughly 900 kilometers. And what's kind of unique about this is most people will run from the top of the trail and work their way down from Tobermory to Niagara. Steve actually did it the other way. He went from Niagara to Tobermory. So it's kind of like all uphill pretty much. So adds a degree of difficulty to something that's already really tough. Steve did this run in support of eatlocalgraybruce.ca and their zero waste project. We're going to learn all about that. Steve, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being here. I know you just completed this 900 kilometer trek like 2 days ago, and here you are. So thanks so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And for me too, I actually really look forward to having these conversations, especially so soon after, because it helps me just talk about it. And you have the chance, if you wait too long, you might lose some of the stories a little bit. So it's great to be on and have a conversation about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this podcast, I named it Trail Tales, a running podcast, and we generally talk anything to do with running, trails, road, track. But I think this must be the most Trail Tales podcast episode there ever has been yet, because we're talking 900 kilometers of trail from June 11th to the 23rd. Like that's insane, man. I can't even fathom that. So I guess my first question I want to ask is, this was the Big Run 3.0. So let's find out a little bit about the Big Run 1.0 and the Big Run 2.0.
For sure. Yeah. So I, without going too far into my overall history, I started running in 2019, and I had tried the year before to do a little bit of running, and I was going to train for a 10K and did a few runs, and I gave up on a 2K run. Said, I guess this isn't for me, but that never quite sticks with me. So I have an amazing partner named Jade, who anyone who's been following the run knows was a very important part of this. And she just, gave me these little encouragements and these little things to try other, I started biking, I started doing more yoga and stretching and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then in 2019, I gave running another shot. And I was going to train for a half marathon. I started running in February. And by my second week of running at that point, I went out and ran a half marathon distance just on my training day. So, all that work and change, including going plant-based, really paid off. And as we worked through the year, I did a marathon, I did my first ultra race, I did some other runs, and I was looking for something at the end of the year big to do, because I had just built this huge base. And it was getting into like November, and there was just nothing out there. There was just no races that either were available or was something bigger than what I'd done. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to go run the, I think it's called the Grey Bruce Rail Trail, but it's a rail trail that runs from Owen Sound all the way down to Orangeville.
I know it. It actually runs through my town here in Shelburne. Yeah. So I spend a lot of time on it in my portion of it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And not even coincidentally, like part of the reason I chose that trail is when I was training in 2018, when I was going to do the 10K and it just didn't happen and I gave up, it was on that trail. I would go out and run that trail, and there was a 1 kilometer stretch from like one road point to the other, and I'd run it to one end and run it back. Right. And, when I got into it, I'm like, well, I gave up on a 1 kilometer stretch of road. Like, I think I can do this whole thing. So, and we went out and we took it on and we did it. It was 114 kilometers. It was at that point twice as far as anything I'd run. It snowed a couple days before, so I was running through snow a lot of it, and a lot of it had been unbroken. So that added a little element to it. And that was the Big Run at the time. That was just the Big Run. There was no 1.0, because it was just the Big Run. And then 2020 hit, and there were no races on the calendar. I mean, I hadn't signed up for anything at that point, I was just going out and running. And I got the idea that I wanted to run the peninsula section of the Bruce Trail. So from Wyerton to Tobermory, which is about 160K. So, you know, a 100 miler. I think I did a 100 kilometer. Let's take on a 100 miler. So we went to do that last September. And that became the Big Run 2.0. And that one, I ended up running. I started in Martin and I got 90 kilometers in up to Cape Chin. And I decided to call it a night at that point. And I didn't finish the run. And I was really okay with it at the time. And I think there's a lot in that experience that came into play in this run I just did, including when I was doing that run, was the same day John Pockler started his run, the current FKT for the Bruce Trail. He started that day in Tobermory heading south. So I actually passed him on the trail and got to meet him on the trail while I was doing my run.
Pretty chance meeting, but an important meeting, I believe, right?
So it was. Yeah, I mean, at that moment, it was just like, I knew who he was. I was expecting him coming just because we were watching him. He had no clue I would be out there.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, we just chatted for a minute. And there's so many amazing things about John's run and how he pulled it off. But where we met, we were on the loop that goes from Lions Head down to Barrows Bay, which is a really rugged remote section. And it was probably 10, 11 o'clock at night. And he was out there without headlamps because they had some issues and he didn't have a headlamp with him. And him and his pacer, Connor, were doing that section with their cell phone headlamps. Like,
oh my gosh.
John he's a beast for the running he did, but those guys just like worked through every problem to get his run in. And it was so amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I guess you got to figure that no matter how much you plan and prepare, something's always gonna come up that you weren't expecting. Eh?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that kind of leads us to the Big Run 3.0. So, you know, it's the end of June now. How much preparation went into this run, and you know, going from there? Let's start with that.
Yeah. So basically, the Big Run 2.0 was in September of 2020. Yes, a year ago. It's 2021, right?
Yeah.
And so after I sort of didn't accomplish my 2.0, I took a day to recover, and then I was watching John's tracker and I saw that he was getting close to Owen Sound. And I'm like, I got to go out and run with him. He's coming up to some sections I do all the time. I know them well. I'm going to go out there. And I ended up the next 3 or 4 days going out and pacing with him and running with him, just to help him up in this area and get through. Wow. And it was in that experience, I was like, you know what? Like, I have the tools. Like, I have the tools to take on the entire trail. It was something I had in my mind for, you know, the future, like 3 or 4 years down the road, maybe.
Yeah.
But I saw what he was doing. I knew the athlete he was, and I knew he had a lot more sort of raw athleticism than I did. But I also saw what takes into doing something like that. And I said, I've got those tools. I mean, it's going to be a lot of work, but I think I can give it a shot. And we literally started planning then, like me and Jade, my partner, and Jen, who's been on our crew every time for these runs and was with us this whole run. We started taking notes and we started looking at, we picked June that we were going to go for it. And we literally started planning then.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, this isn't something you can just kind of, you know, decide you're going to do it and go out and do it, because it's a pretty big deal. And I'm sure there's a lot of logistics at play with it. And, you know, you need support with it as well. So take me to, you know, before we get into the beginning of the run, can you just talk a little bit about Eat Local Grey Bruce and what they're doing and why it was important for you to support them?
Definitely. To start with, like, food is such an important part of what I do as a runner and what I do as an athlete. And I'm plant-based. That's part of it. I think that benefits me in a lot of ways. It helps me with recovery, helps me perform the way I can. And going plant-based for me was influential in going from that runner who couldn't run 2K to the runner who just did 900 kilometers in 12 days and 13 hours. So food is super important. So we wanted to partner with organizations that fit some of our values and that we believed in. And Eat Local Grey Bruce is a not-for-profit co-op that looks to connect local growers and food producers with local eaters. So essentially, they're a service you can order food from. You do your order each week, and they deliver it right to your house. But it's all local farmers, local growers, local food producers. So we're supporting that local food culture. It's also healthy food. And I think, in this age of, mass produced, factory farmed, over processed food, we need to find better systems. And that stuff is cheap and easy. And there's a reason it is everywhere. Yeah. And if we want a different world than that, which I think most people do, I think most people know there's better food to eat. We've got to support those groups that are trying to do that, and they are. And Eat Local, not only that, they're also conscious of how they function in the community. They have a solidarity model they just launched where you can purchase tokens to help people who aren't as privileged as someone like me to afford their services, and they provide for those people. And they have different membership platforms. So again, if you're more well off, you can pay more as a membership. So others who might not be able to can, take part in what they do. And then specifically the Zero Waste Initiative they're also trying to go zero waste. Like they're doing all these things. Just doing one of those would be, a step in the right direction, and they're taking them all on. So they're trying to get rid of all the packaging that we don't need, all the plastics and clamshells and stuff. And the big part of this project is they're trying to package all their dry goods and stuff in mason jars and reusable containers and create the infrastructure and everything they need for that, which seems like a simple thing, but when you put that to scale, there's a lot that goes into that. And us supporting this will hopefully get them to that point. And then it's there, then the system's there, and it can, function going forward. So that's what Eat Local Grey Bruce is about. And yeah, in general, it lines up very much with our values. We like to support local food growers. Trying to go zero, like lower waste, was something we were actively doing ourselves. And if the people we're buying our food from are doing that, it makes it easier for us.
Absolutely. It sounds like a great initiative from so many different angles, and you're building community, and, people are getting together and helping those who are less fortunate. And, it's pretty much one step away from growing your own food in your own garden. So you can't get much fresher than that. You're going to get health benefits from it as well, and good for the environment. So great stuff, great organization. Thanks for sharing that with us. Absolutely. So that is eatlocalgraybruce.ca. If anybody wants to check them out and support them and see what they're all about, you can go there. So Steve, let's go to June 11th. This is day one. You're down at Queenston High Park in Niagara. So what's on your mind at that point? What was the night before, I guess, your sleep? Did you get a good sleep? Were you nervous? Were you calm?
I wasn't too bad. I got an okay sleep. We traveled that day. So we, Thursday morning, the 10th, we got up in Owen Sound. We'd already done like most of the prep. We just had to sort of pack everything up. I had to go pick up the RV in Brampton. We went down to where we were staying in Niagara and parked where a friend of ours down there gave us their driveway. Had to do a few things. We actually went to the park that night just to scope out the landscape. It's a little funky there where the trail comes out and runs through the park, and it's actually can be hard to. The first couple kilometers of the trail actually can be a little hard to like follow. So we just walked that through. Yeah. Actually remember when John was finishing his run, they were like in the dark trying to like find the rest of the little trail, get to the cairn. So we sort of scoped that out. And yeah, I got a pretty good sleep. I mean, we were aiming at a 4 a.m. start. So, we were getting up at 3 a.m. So, but I had also, somewhere along the way, I got some really good advice. Is like, don't worry about the sleep the night before the run, because it's going to be crappy no matter what.
Right.
Make sure that the 2 previous nights to that, you give yourself the opportunity to have really good sleeps, which is what I did. So, I didn't sleep the greatest that night, but that was somewhat expected.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. So, yeah, man, June 11th at the beginning at this park, do they have like a placard there or anything that signifies the beginning of the trail or the end of the trail, whichever way you're going, I guess?
Yeah, actually, on both ends there's a big cairn, so this big stone structure, and they're pretty similar on both ends. And yeah, it's a pretty nice symbolization of like the start and the end of the trail. And if you
Awesome,
haven't
man.
seen it, you should. And you should probably Google a picture. I'll send you a picture of us at the end, and
Please
the
do,
one
yeah.
the one at the starts, or both ends are very similar.
All right, cool. So you know what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna stop asking you questions. I want you to just kind of share your experience with us on the run and how it was from your eyes, man.
For sure. Obviously, going for the FKT was a goal of mine, and it was something I had my sights set on, and that was as much. I think you need something to be shooting for. If I hadn't have aimed for that, I wouldn't have put the work and effort in needed to maybe to actually just finish the trail in the end. So that was from day one, I'm like, I can go for this record, like I can give it a shot. And day one went well. We got, I think, about 103 kilometers in. It was a good day.
Oh wow, that's good. Yeah.
Which is, but that's the pace you need to keep up for the next bunch of days.
Yeah.
So day one went well. I didn't feel like I overworked. We did a trial weekend a couple months before, just a 3-day thing, just to see how it played out. And in that, we learned a lot just about some diet issues and like getting calories in me, and realized how much I overworked the first day to essentially accomplish the same thing. So the plan was, working pretty well. Day two went good. I think I got about 80K in. So even right there, like 80K is a pretty big day, but you're already starting to fall a little short of where you need to be. And I thought, okay, it's day two. My body at that point is really starting to like hurt. And this is again something we anticipate to other people who've done this. There's going to be some middle days there where you're just in really rough shape, and you've got to push through those. And eventually it turns and you'll start to feel better, as weird as that sounds. There'll be a point where a lot of the pain goes away and your body really loosens up and understands what's going on. So we knew there would be this point where I'd have to push through some of that. And the goal was just to try to get as close to those kilometers as we needed. And then on day three, I think it was day three, I got about like 60K, and that was a rough one. Both physically, I was hurting physically and just mentally, because even that early, I knew, I'm like, that's my mulligan. Like that's my day that I can't have another day like this, or the record's just like not an option anymore. It was still, even at that point, like it was going to be a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And then the next bunch of days, to some extent, just blurred together. We were slugging it out. My knees were pretty bad shape. We're having issues with food. Like I was just having trouble eating enough. And it wasn't like so much a issue with like not wanting to eat. Like I just couldn't, my body just wouldn't take in enough food. I was doing a lot of liquid stuff. We had this joke where it was one of these days where I was basically only eating, like they were just doing smoothies and stuff, which was part of our nutrition plan, a big part of it. But we had other food and I just couldn't eat any of the solid food. And I knew I needed something different. So I finally told Jane and Jen, I'm like, just take some rice and beans, put them in the blender, add some water, I'll just drink it. I just need some other stuff. And they did it. And I was jokingly calling them bean smoothies. They didn't think that was the most appealing thing, and they like to call it soup, because I mean that's, you make soup like that, you heat some stuff up, you give it a little blend, it's a soup, right? So that's the state we're at, in probably the 4, 5, 6 area. I was drinking bean smoothies and my knees were in rough shape, and it was slogging out, and mentally it was tough because at that point the record was like off the table, right? Like it just wasn't going to happen, and we knew it right at that point. But you're maybe a little more than a third of the way. Like you're a third of the way at this point, right? And it's just then it starts to seem like so big. But a lot of credit to Jade and Jen, the crew, for everything they did themselves, but also everything they started to do to find a way forward. They really rallied. We had a lot of support we knew coming up as we moved north into Blue Mountain and into the Beaver Valley and through Owen Sound. We knew we had a lot more support as we got up that way. And we had some great support down south, some people that came out and ran, and I had a lot of pacers and just help. But we knew we really needed, or they knew I really needed some support. And they just started pulling it together and started getting some people down to help me get through those days, because they were tough days.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Not, sorry to interrupt here. I'm kicking myself because your run came to my attention about 2 days or maybe a day after you ran through the section here in Dufferin County. I totally would have been out there and running through that section with you. And I'm just kicking myself thinking, oh man, so close. But
yeah, and it's interesting, right? Like sort of how the word spreads in this community.
Yeah.
It is a very tight community. But sometimes, yeah, it just, people hear about it at different times. And I truly believe people show up at the right time when you need it. And that happened a lot. And at some point in there, I probably through Caledon, maybe getting up into Blue Mountains through the Dufferins, we started getting some of the runners from the Blue Mountains. There's an amazing group of female ultra runners in the Beaver Valley and Blue Mountain area. Like just unbelievable. Like the caliber of runners they are is unbelievable. The type of people they are is amazing. And they really rallied to help me. And that started to be the turning point. That started to be like, okay, I'm still hurting, but it's like starting to be manageable again. Like I can move, but I did have some tough days through those sections too. And then in the midst of all that, Jade had been talking with John Pockler, who holds the record. And he was very helpful for me the whole time leading up. Like I would call him a number of times and he would offer any support, advice, information I asked for. And so Jade actually got John to give me a call one night after I ran. And I had a really good conversation with John. A lot of people can tell you, like, you got this, you can keep going. But it's when you hear that from someone who's actually done it and they say, you got this, you can keep going, you can get to the end. It just hits you in a different way. Mm-hmm. And, that was hugely helpful for me. And yeah, through there and through the Blue Mountains, physically there are actually some really tough days, but it started to turn. And then we got into Owen Sound, which is where I'm from. And I had some really great day. The great day leading into Owen Sound, I think it was Saturday. I was trying to get the Owen Sound, like there's the big Owen Sound sign, which is actually right on the trail. I was trying to get there, I think on Saturday night, and I came up just short. But then Sunday, the trail kind of does this neat thing where it loops almost around the perimeter of Owen Sound through Inglis Falls and some beautiful stuff. And we just had so many people out supporting and running. And I made a big stretch up and got just about to the Wyerton. I think I was about 15K short of Wyerton by the end of the day. Wow. And that was the point where I started thinking, this might actually happen. As weird as that is, right? But you're still 180K to go, and 160 of that K is the peninsula section, which is rugged terrain.
Yeah. All right, man. So, getting into that last 160 kilometers there in that rugged terrain, how did you fare through that?
Actually, surprisingly well. So what I had talked about earlier about that thing with eventually your body gets on board with what you're doing.
Yeah, that
had started happening, especially through, I think once I did that run through Owen Sound. I had a really great end of the day. Whichever day that was after the Sunday it would have been. And at the end of the night, I had done about just short of 70K, and we were right on top of Kemble Mountain. And then there's this really nice run where you're sort of running across the top of Kemble Mountain, and then you run down the hill towards Big Bay. And then there's another little forest stretch, and you run towards the Slough of Despond. And there's this 3K road section that's like this old logging road or something that is literally a 3K straight shot that is just wide enough for a car, and there is nothing on the road. The road's closed. And it is the most surreal thing you could imagine, especially at that point. And I just bombed from the top of Campbell Mountain all the way down. I was supposed to meet Jade just before I entered that last section, but I went so fast that I got there before she got there. She wasn't expecting me. Like I got there like a half hour before like my pace, like I should have been there. So I just sort of left my hat at the trailhead and then went in and did that section and see me at the end. And that felt really good. To get that section done. So then going into the Peninsula section, my body was in really good shape. Like my legs weren't hurting as much. It was tough getting up each morning, but my body really responded well each day.
That's good. That's good. And I'm sure you attribute a lot of that to the way you eat, right? And the food you're consuming and your nutrition plan and everything there.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. I've always had, the recovery time's always been a big thing for me, and having really strong recovery time for a lot of reasons. Like I can go out and do a big day of training and I'm good the next day, which means I can go out and do some more training. Like obviously you're not, stacking. So actually sometimes I stack big workouts back to back in preparation for something like this. But yeah, definitely the diet is a huge part of that. There was one night late, actually, like one of the last couple nights I think we were in Hope Bay is where we were staying. And this might be a little bit of the TMI of trail running, but you're putting so much fluids into your body that at night it's hard to sleep even for 4 hours straight. You got to get up a few times and go to the washroom. And I went to bed, and then at some point I woke up and I had to go to the washroom. I sort of hobbled out, walked over to the washroom. And then a couple of hours later, I woke up again and I started walking. I'm like, whoa, like this is a lot easier, like already, right? And then it happened again. I woke up and I'm like, oh, like I'm actually walking pretty good now. And it's just crazy in those just little hours of sleep, how much my body turned around.
That's amazing, man. That's almost like a superhero power to recover that fast. That's pretty good, man. And that's got to be, so kind of uplifting, just like I'm feeling good.
Yeah, it was really, especially those last couple of days, just to feel how my body was. Like my feet were beat up, and there was like some swelling and inflammation, and they still do now. That's about the only sort of thing right now I'm working through, is they feel really solid and tight. So I don't quite have the mobility in my feet that I normally have. So that was the one thing, but my legs felt great. Like I didn't have knee issues, muscles weren't getting tight. It was a really good last couple of days.
That's awesome, man. I wanted to ask, would it be the Peninsula section that you consider the hardest part of this 900-kilometer trail to run, or what would you consider kind of, one of the hardest parts? What were one of the easier parts for you?
Yeah. I mean, traditionally, and the reason everyone does this trail southbound, like going for a run, like running the trail, is that the Peninsula section is the most rugged section. And I've done a lot of the trail, and through experiencing this, like there's rugged stuff the entire way.
Mm-hmm.
And I even thought, like, because I've hiked the entire Peninsula section before, so I know the terrain, I know what it's like. And I knew that going in. And when I ran like the southern sections and the stuff, I hadn't, like, there's just rugged stuff everywhere. Like you're not escaping it. But after doing this, I realized like the peninsula is just relentless. Like it's 160K and there's very few breaks. There's a few sections that, let up a little bit. There is actually a big chunk of road section near the end that I did on the last day. I think about 12K of road and then like an ATV track. So there is that little break, if you want to call it, but the rest is just relentless. And so I think my thought process going into this, and one of the reasons why I chose to do it northbound, is that, well, if the Peninsula section is the most rugged section, is it a good idea to do that on your first day and really beat yourself up, as opposed to save it to the end where you're only going to be going so fast anyways, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, this will always be up for debate. Someone's going to go at some point and smash the record. Like maybe going northbound, like pull a Scott Jurek on the Bruce Trail and do it. But it was rugged and relentless up there.
Yeah.
But it's
Okay.
also beautiful, like unbelievably beautiful in that section.
Yeah. A lot of tree canopy and everything. I imagine. I've never been up that way, but.
Yeah, I mean, the neat thing about the peninsula section is, so you start in, the peninsula section basically starts in Wyerton, and you do this run sort of along the coast, and then you sort of round, and you start to be able to see up the peninsula. And this is really the only place on the trail. I mean, you can't physically see the trail, but you can look up the coastline like 20, 30 kilometers, and you see the points coming out of like Lion's Head and everything. And you're like, the trail just hugs the coastline. So you can look that far ahead and go like,
wow.
I'm going to be up there like eventually. And you don't get that in the southern end of the trail just because like you don't have that big of a vantage point. So it'd be amazing. Like, you know, some mornings I'd wake up and I'd get on the trail and I'd be like on one of these points out where the trail goes at sunrise, and you'd look up the coastline and it just seemed forever away where like the next point was. And then like later that day, you're at that point looking back to where you were. And then you do that again. And by the end of the day, you can look back and see like the point south of you, but there's 3 more points you went over through that day. And it's just, to experiencing that was absolutely amazing, especially like how far I had to travel to get there.
Yeah, I gotta say it's pretty awe-inspiring to think that, you know, human body with your own 2 feet is traveling that distance, you know, whereas I mean driving 900 kilometers in a car is is tough, right? So
Yeah.
just doing that on your own 2 feet with nothing else but just your body is just awe-inspiring. There's no other word for it, I think, you know.
Yeah, and I know I actually, just beside my computer here, I have the map of the entire Bruce Trail. It's been posted beside my computer for months. And yeah, you look at it and it's crazy. Like you know, you pass under the 401, and at that point you've already traveled 200 kilometers, right?
Right?
And then you pass like through Highway 9 and then across Shelburne, and then up into the Blue Mountains, and you're still 2/3 of the way, like not even 2/3 of the way. And there's this beautiful section through Beaver Valley. And yeah, it's just, it's wild. And I had this moment where we were in the peninsula section. So we were north of Wyerton, and someone had come out to join us, one of the pacers, actually, a woman named Joan, who was a beast. She was with me a lot of the last couple of days. She did the entire last day with me. Huge help when she was out there. And she got there and she was just sort of chatting, and she said, yeah, I was a little late getting here this morning. Like, she wasn't late, she just didn't get there as early as she wanted to. And she said, yeah, they did the detour around Wyerton's all different right now. And I said, I don't remember. Like, I was thinking in my head, I don't remember that. And I'm like, oh yeah, because I didn't drive it. Like I was on the trail. Like you know, I'm 60 kilometers north of Wyerton right now, and like I'm doing this all by foot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy when you think about it like that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. So I want to ask too, Steve. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about, you know, as much as you can plan and prepare for things, there's always things that happen that you didn't quite expect. Did you have any of those moments while you're out on the trail? Anything that kind of surprised you, or just kind of, you know, like funny moments, things like that?
Yeah, there was a few. I mean, part of it is a lot of these things, you know, are probably going to happen. Like, we knew I'd probably have some knee issues, as much as you can prepare for that. We knew I might have some feet issues. We knew I'd probably have some eating issues. We knew there'd be sleep issues.
Mm-hmm.
We knew there might be some like trail issues, like in the sense that like the Bruce Trail is almost its own organic thing. Like, there's reroutes happen and stuff like that. So you've always got to be prepared. And again, my crew was really on that, to making sure we had the most up-to-date version of the trail, because you don't want to go like on a section you're not supposed to be, right?
Right.
Then you have to backtrack, right? So for me personally, it was pretty much as expected. Like, again, you kind of know what the unexpected things were. We ran into a few funny things. We had a crazy encounter with a skunk one night, which he cost us about a half hour. Which
Oh,
is,
no kidding.
Yeah, normally when you come across some wildlife, if you give them a little space and sort of push them along, eventually they'll move off. But we were in between these two fence lines, and there was just nowhere for the skunk to go, and nowhere for us to go. Like, we can't backtrack 4 kilometers. And so that was just, and the skunk played dead, which was, I've never experienced something like that. So that was pretty wild. But beyond that, I mean, the crew, Jade and Jen, like, they just went through so much to make this happen. And I think that's where a lot of the quote unquote unexpected, or quote unquote like real, not struggles, but challenges were. They were just working so hard to keep the machine going forward. And by design, like, just sort of shield me from all that. Like, we had those conversations going in where it's like, if there are problems on the logistics end, then what's going on and how we're going to do this, I don't need to know about that. Like, I can't know about that. If I'm worried about, where we're sleeping that night or how this is going to happen, like, I just need all my energy to be focused on moving forward. And they're amazing at just taking on all those challenges and figuring them out.
Perfect. Yeah, because you have one job, and I guess any distractions are just going to kind of, side rail you from there, and you need all your brain power, all your focus, everything to be on the task at hand, eh?
Exactly. And I mean,
Yeah.
people experience that in day-to-day life, right? Like, if you're working and then all of a sudden, like, someone goes, well, the toilet's leaking, right? Like, oh God, I got it. Like, you can't focus on work anymore. You got to go fix that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, that type of thing, right? Like there was literally a point where, like, we were projected to finish, if I finished within the record, a little bit of wiggle room, I would have been done on Sunday. And that's sort of what we had planned for. We had planned for Sunday. Monday would be the recovery day for everyone. But it became clear before that just wasn't going to happen. And at that point, like, Jade needs to go back to work. Jen needs to go back to work. We've got an RV that's rented that needs to be back on Monday. Right? Like, that's the situation we're in. And I mean, in my mind, I knew like that's going to have to get figured out. But I just, I'm so lucky to have a partner like Jade and a friend like Jen who just, they're like, we got it. Like, you just keep moving and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. It sounds like Jade and Jen were almost like your guardian angels on the trail, eh?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, beyond just logistically, like, just they understood why I want to do this. And we've had conversations around this, in the sense that we'd get to the point where I would be so sleep deprived, probably calorie deficient, although we kept up pretty good, just exhausted. Like, I'm not the one to be making good decisions at that point. And people experience that in, like, again, in day-to-day life. If you're really tired and, if you didn't sleep the night before, like, you're probably not going to make the best decisions. So we sort of made an agreement before we went into the run that I would just give them information, in the sense, like, I'm really tired. I'm not sure I can do any more tonight. This is what's hurting. This food's not working. But I wouldn't make the decision. Like, I want to stop. Like, I would just give them the information, and they would go, okay, but you're going to do a bit more tonight, and this is what's going to happen, and you're not stopping. Right. And I had agreed too that I would trust them. If they said what was happening, I would trust them. And it's within that context of, I know I'm not making a rational decision right now. I might be speaking the words that I don't want to keep going, but they know me well enough and could see the bigger picture that, yes, you can, and you will. Yeah. And I just trusted them.
That's amazing, man. This is a bit, little tongue in cheek here, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that might be thinking your decision to just run the whole trail is probably not a good decision.
Yeah, definitely. Right.
There's some people out there going, I would never do that. Most of us.
For sure. Right. And, but I also think that's like, if you don't go and try, and if you don't go, like, if you don't take a shot at something that big, how would you know? Like, I would never know that I could go do something like that. Yeah. There's no test for something like that. Like
No.
as amazing as, things like running like 100K or even 100 miler, like you can get pretty close to knowing if you can do that. Like,
Yeah.
there's again, even with those are big accomplishments, and there is no certainty even in something like that, but you can be within the realm of going, yeah, I can probably do that. But like, it's not like I'm going to go out and run 600, 700 kilometers to test if I can run 900, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just think there's something so important about setting goals like that, even beyond running, whatever it is, just so far beyond what you think is possible, and then just going seeing if you can do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've got your website, fearnotrail.com, open up on my screen here, and it says right on the front page, if your goal is to eliminate fear, you will always be running from it. When you choose to embrace it, to know it, you will find your true potential. And I think that just encapsulates everything you just said right there. It's so true. And um, there throughout my life, I've always had kind of desires or goals to see if I could do things. And then, I think one of the ingredients that kind of pushes me to go for those goals is the fear of, is it, can I do this? Is it, how hard is it going to be? And it's like you said, if you don't do it, you're never going to really know. And I think that's one of the great things about running and ultra running is we're always trying to kind of find out what our limits are and tap into that area where I think very few people actually ever get to, where you experience this on your run, where you just feel like you can't go on anymore, where you're done, and you've got support there and people are saying, no, you got more, you can do more. And when you think that the task in front of you is so big it can't be accomplished, you just keep plugging away, and you dig down deep inside and find whatever it is inside you that can keep you going. And then lo and behold, you accomplish it, right? And now you're looking back in the rearview mirror going, yeah, man, that's behind me, I did it, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely have not always lived like this way, like in
Sure.
specifically with the fear thing, but somewhere in the past like 5 or 6 years, which is really where I started to like think about changing my life around a little bit. And not that I mean, I had a good life and everything was fine, but it wasn't. I knew I was like not living up to what I probably could be doing. And somewhere along the line, there's that notion of fear, whether it was a quote or an interview with someone or a podcast. And it was like, if you have that tingle of fear about something, like that's actually like a sign you need to like go towards that, like run towards that fear and see what'll happen.
Yeah.
If it's not the fear you have if you see a bear, like don't run towards a bear.
Exactly. good
but
good distinction.
but like, that fear where like if you're like skydiving and you get that little churn in your stomach where you're like, I don't know if I could do that. You probably should. Like, you should probably go experience it.
Yeah, because we only get one trip around in this lifetime, and you may as well try to experience as much as you can. And it's a wonderful thing. And I always say, I'm always a big advocate for advising people, don't, when you get into that comfort zone, it's time to do something else, or time to get out of that comfort zone. You don't want to get stuck in that area where you're just kind of day in day out doing the same thing, and you're not really experiencing all that life has to offer. So always good to kind of push yourself, and for everybody it's going to be a little bit different, right? So gotta
Exactly.
gotta gotta do what you're here to do, whether it's running 900 kilometers in 12 days and 13 hours, or just getting off the couch and running a couch to 5K, like, running one time around the block, whatever it is, just get out and do it. Or, taking a cooking class, who knows, like, what I mean?
Yeah. And exactly to
Amazing.
that point too, like I don't want people to think that I'm like some absolute beast that went out and like did this, like, because like literally 3 years ago I was the guy who couldn't run like 2 kilometers, and I got up and said, like, I'm at least gonna try to do that. I'm gonna go see if I can run 5K. And that's where it starts, right? Like, now it may not lead to this, and that's fine, it doesn't have to.
Exactly.
But don't let what you like don't think of the grandness of things you might not be able to do, like prevent you from doing the things you can do right now.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's amazing to think that, you did accomplish this in such a short period of time, but there's been a lot of work, a lot of running, a lot of learning in that period of time, and things don't happen overnight, right? It's small consistent efforts over time that kind of build up to bigger things. And it almost, if you're doing it right, it's almost like the throughout the process, you don't even really notice the changes that are happening. It just seems like, okay, a 5K effort 3 years ago now feels like the same effort I'm putting in to run a 50K or 100 or whatever, right? Whatever it is,
Yeah,
it doesn't even have to be running, to be honest. But yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff for sure. And one of those things I definitely encourage people who are listening, to go out and try something new, change it up a little bit, and see where it takes you, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about gear, if you will. So I guess one of the things I'm curious about is what shoes did you choose to wear on this trail? Did you have like a number of different shoes that you wore?
This shoe question, this is such a, I think for most people to do something like this would be like a pretty standard question, but just for me and how I approach this shoe issue was actually like such a crazy thing.
Oh,
So
really?
I actually, um, for the past, I don't know, 9 months, 8, 10 months, I started using Vivo barefoot shoes, which are very minimalist, like
Yeah.
no cushioning, no support shoes. And I've run in exclusively in those for the past 9 months, 10 months, including all my trail running, like everything. I was wearing Vivos for a lot of reasons. They really reduced the impact that was coming up my body. They let my feet do what they needed to do. They really help with stability, because I can really feel the ground.
Hmm.
And I think there's something about the body's contact with the ground. When you put cushioning between that, there's a delay. But when that's not there, your body's able to do what it's supposed to do, and work how it's supposed to work. So my plan was to do the run in Vivos, multiple 100Ks in Vivos. I was very comfortable in running at those. So, but I also knew with the Vivos, like there's going to be foot issues as far as swelling and stuff like that. Like that's
Yeah.
just going to happen. So I had two different types of Vivos. I had their Stealth, which are a very low profile, very minimal tread shoe. They're my go-to. And I had those in the size I normally wear and a size bigger.
Okay.
And then I had Vivo's trail shoe, which is again a minimalist shoe, very low profile, very low tread, but they actually had some like grippy tread on them.
Okay.
And I would use those if it was wet out, because the other ones, like if it was wet, I'd just be slipping, right?
Right.
And again, I had those in two different sizes, my regular size and a size bigger, anticipating that my feet were going to expand.
Sure. Sure.
And that was actually part of a lesson I learned after hearing about Adam, who he held the record before John. And he had some pretty big foot issues from what I understand. And they cut the toes out of his shoes. So
Oh,
they
wow.
give his feet more room to so that was the reason I had these sizes bigger. Like, I'm like, I want to be prepared in case that happens.
Yeah.
But then I might have been day 6 or 7, something like that. I was just starting the Beaver Valley section. So I just finished the Blue Mountain section. And I was going out in the morning to start the Beaver Valley section. And I had a runner named Kate from the area, from Collingwood, one of those amazing women runners from that region. She was out with me dressed as a unicorn, as one does. And we started going out, and I couldn't walk, and not from a muscular, skeletal type issue of walking. There were lightning bolts shooting up the bottom of my feet with every step I took.
Oh,
It
wow.
was horrendous pain. But she's a runner, and she understands. And she said, well, we're just going to keep walking. We're going to keep going. And what do you need to fix this problem? And I said, I need different shoes. I actually do need something right now that's got some cushioning.
Yeah.
This just isn't going to work. Right. And this is 5 a.m, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So she got on the phone with the crew, and I knew I had a pair of shoes in my closet at home, which luckily was Owen Sound. We were about 45, 50 minutes from Owen Sound. I said, I have one pair of like my old trail shoes are in my closet at home. They may work, right? They may not, but that's one option. So while that was happening, Jade coordinated her mom to go to our house, get the shoes, and drive them over. And Jade was going to meet her in Thornbury and get the shoes. Jen grabbed my trail shoes because I was wearing my Stells, and I had my Vivo hiking boots in the car with us. They had my hiking boots. And Jen got on the trail like ahead of us and walked back in to meet us. Kate then got on the phone with VO2 Sports in Collingwood.
Yep,
and
I know them.
They don't even open until noon, but she knows the brothers there, and got on the phone with them and started coordinating getting some other shoe options.
Oh, wow.
So at some point, and for this whole morning for me felt really short, but it also, I don't know, felt long because I never actually got off the trail. Jen made it out, and I put on the Vivo hiking boots, which isn't much more padding, but they're a little more solid. So those impacts weren't like as much. I'm like, okay, I can at least walk in these without it being like brutal pain. So I just started hiking a little faster. I could actually move with those like a little better. And then by the time we got to the next trail crossing, like at the road, Jade was there with my shoes, the shoes I had at home. So I threw those on. I said, oh, okay, like this is good. I can move in these. And then I ran out the next section. Like I ran out the next 3 or 4K. And by the time I got there, Kate had left at that point, went to VO2 Sports, got 3 pairs of shoes, brought them back to the next trail crossing. And I tried on these 3 pairs of shoes. None of them unfortunately worked. They were just like too tight over the top of my foot. My foot just wouldn't really fit in them well.
Yeah.
But I had these other ones that were working okay. And then in the midst of all of this, Jade had also reached out to the Runner's Den, which is the store in Owen Sound here.
Yep.
And they had the exact shoes I was wearing in a couple sizes bigger, because that's kind of what I needed at that point. And they said, yep, well, we got them. Like, how do we get them to you? A friend of ours who was going to come and pace me that day went into Owen Sound, got them, brought them out. I normally wear a size 9. I put on a size 10, and I wore a size 10 for basically almost the rest of the run. And I think the second last day at some point, I said, I'm floating around in these shoes a little bit now. I think all the swelling and stuff is released from my feet. And I switched back to the 9s and did the last day and a half in the size 9s. So yeah, I know that was just sort of, was there going to be a simple question about the shoes I wore, but the shoes were actually a big story to this whole thing. So
yeah, no kidding. A lot involved in that one for sure. And a lot of people involved too, to kind of try to get you all squared away so you can keep going, eh?
Yeah. And that's part of that story when we talked earlier about like how there was a turning point in and around that area in that Blue Mountain. Yeah. I think that story is also a big part of it, because you can start to feel pretty alone out on the trail there, even when there's someone out there pacing you, like you've got someone there with you.
Yeah.
But when that happened and like that many people just rallied to figure it out, and it was like, okay, this is bigger. This is a little bigger than me, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
And that was just all part of that turning point for me.
Yeah, and would you even have expected that much support for something like that? That's insane, 100%. Eh? It's like pretty uplifting.
Like you'd think, like, you know, if some elite athlete said, hey, I'm having some like foot problems, like some runner shops would probably jump to help them out. Like VO2 Sports had no idea who I am. I've never interacted with them, right? They knew Kate, and Kate called, and like, you know, they were happy to support, like, jump. And that it means something, right? Like it means something that they could see what I was out trying to do and were happy to help.
Yeah, it just goes to show you how great the running community really is from all aspects, man. From, you know, it's just it's such great people, just willing to support, you know, complete strangers too in any way, just to kind of accomplish your goals. So it's a pretty awesome community to be a part of, for sure. Yeah. So, you know, I've typically just spent, you know, time out on the Bruce Trail and the side trails here in Dufferin County, you know, Orangeville, Shelburne area. But I'm assuming, like, you know, the white flashes are all the main trail, and throughout the entire the entirety of the trail. The side trails are probably marked by blue flashes. Did you just stick right to the main trail route? There was no like kind of turns going off to a side trail or doing a little section there to explore?
No, like part of the thing when you're going for the like an end to end, an FKT, like one
You
of
don't
the
have
things is
time.
you stick to the trail like
Yeah.
100%. And most people who do it take that pretty seriously, and not in like a like sort of strict rule kind of thing. It's almost like an integrity around it. Like I had a couple like things I would do where you know, the ladders or the like the turnstiles that go over
The
some
styles,
fences and
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. I would go over every single one. Even you'll come across some where you could just walk past it. Like there's
Yeah.
actually like no fence there, but there's the style still there.
Yeah.
I would go over every single one, no matter what, because in my opinion, that's part of the trail.
Yeah,
The
there you
ladder is
go.
actually part of the trail.
Yeah, it's
Um,
interesting. I have a dog. Well, I've got a puppy too, so I do a lot of canicross running with my dogs. So they're
yeah,
on a lead in front of me, and they kind of pull me, and I just tell them which way to go. And I was out not too long ago on a section of the Bruce here, and came up to a style. There were a few we passed. So the first one, I kind of picked her up, and I had my friend on the other side. He took her and went. She's like a golden or a yellow lab husky mix. We got as a rescue from Manitoba. Anyway, came up to the next one, and boom, up and down she went right on her own. I was amazed because I took her off the lead so I could pick her up, and she just went on
yeah,
her own. I was like, oh, pretty cool.
yeah. There's some
So
actually. I'd never seen them up this way, but there are some down south that actually have like a little dog hole cut out beside them where the dogs
yeah,
can just
yeah,
run
we came
underneath.
across those too. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool.
So yeah, but in general, you 100% stick to the white blazes. And you know, there were times where, like, if you go off track, which happens occasionally, I'd have to loop back. Even if it was like 100 meters, even if it was 20 meters, even if it was 5 meters that I somehow went off trail, I would go back and make sure I did that actual section to say like, and it's just that mentality of like, if I'm going to hike the entire trail, I'm going to hike the entire trail. And I'm not going to miss sections. And there are little things I would do to sort of make sure that happened. Whenever at the end of the night, when I finished, you obviously finish at a road crossing, like when you finish.
Yeah,
And I go across the road to where you'd sort of go into the next section. And there's typically a sign there saying like Bruce Trail entrance, or there's just a blaze there. And I would go over and I'd physically tag that blaze or that sign. And then when I came back in the morning to start, I would tag that sign, and I would call it tagging, you know, the trail. So I made sure like I finished and started at the exact same spot.
nice, nice. Yeah, and that's a real great way to just have that continuity that you've done every
Yeah,
single portion of it, right? That's
exactly.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
I guess it would kind of put you in that mindset too. Like tag it, okay, I'm out, I'm done for the day, and then you back to business the next day. Tag it, and away you go, eh?
Exactly. And it's as much that part of it too, right? This sort of
Yeah,
mentality of like, okay, I'm back in it, I'm back on the trail.
yeah, exactly, man. So I wanted to ask too, like, what was your typical day like? Did you have a certain amount of hours you were out? Was it the same every day? Did it vary? Did you wake up at the same time every day? Go to bed at the same time? How did you kind of go, or did you just kind of go by feel?
A little bit by feel, but within a structure. So it stuck pretty similar. We had originally planned that I'd be starting each morning at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
But I think after about day 2 or 3, we sort of pushed that back a little bit to 5. Like it was just, we realized that was just pushing it a little too far. But in general, in the mornings, I'd be on the trail at 5 o'clock. There were still a few mornings I started a little earlier, but generally around 5. And most mornings, what would happen is the alarm would go off. Jade and Jen's alarm would go off, and they would just hop out of bed and just start doing the things that I needed. So Jen would be making me food and everything, like the smoothie and stuff to get me going. Jade would be getting all the gear and everything ready. I'd be laying in bed just trying to get the blood flowing and get the legs going.
Yeah.
Jade would give me a quick like leg massage. I'm also super lucky that Jade's a registered massage therapist. So
Oh, perfect.
Jen is as well, actually. So I've got this amazing support crew who understands the body. And it's super helpful because we can deal with problems immediately. We don't have to wait. We can just try to fix them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then the morning would start, and I would, we'd sort of go through that routine. We'd there were some times where we actually were parked basically right at the trailhead. So I could just walk out of the RV and hop on a trail, or we'd be like 10 minutes away and we drive to the trailhead 10, 15 minutes away. And then we'd get going in the morning. And then I'd go anywhere probably between about 8 to 10. I think we pushed till 11 o'clock one night. We always wanted to push later, but it got to a point where like pushing much past that like 8 or 9 o'clock, it was just negative returns, right?
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes that would have to do with just the reality of the trail. Like if it was like 8:30 and there was a section I would be coming to that would take me 2 hours and 2.5 hours to do before they can meet me again. Well, we can't go into that section. Like I can't go in that late, right? But maybe if it's 8:30, 9 o'clock, and there's like a little 3K section, well, yeah, I can knock that out and we can call it quits at the end. So sometimes that was also in play. Like, what's the actual next section look like? Because, you can't just say like, well, we're going to stop at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock might be in the middle of some section of trail where it's like, 3 kilometers to the next road crossing. So,
yeah. Interesting. What do you know off top of your head? Like, what is the longest section of trail throughout this whole thing?
Like the longest like section where you don't have access?
Yeah.
That'd be up in the peninsula through the park. Now there are a few access points there, but basically there's almost 40K that's really hard to get to. You start at, I forget what it's called, but like the southern end of the park. And I think it's about 15K, maybe even a little more, maybe 16 or 17. And you get to a place called Halfway Log Dump. There's a couple names for it, where there is access. And we were lucky enough that we talked to some of the people at the park. And because those lots can get full, like this includes the grotto, which is such a huge tourist attraction now, where those lots can get full and like the support crew couldn't even get in if they wanted to. But we were lucky that we talked to some of the people at the park and let them know what they're up to. And the crew was able to get into that first stop and meet me. And then it was about a 16K stretch through the rest of the park. Again, that too, there is a point where they could have got in to meet me. But even for that is they have to drive in a big ways and then actually hike in a little ways to actually get to where the main trail would be.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So it's a big remote stretch along there. And whereas most other places like might be remote, or like a big stretch, you're not actually as remote as you seem. Like up there, like you're out in the wilderness. Like there's no easy way to get in if something were to happen.
Yeah. Okay. Thankfully, nothing did. That's for sure.
Nothing did. And I had on that day, that last day through that, I had Joan, another runner named Steve with me that day through that section, which was huge. Like they just powered through with me all day to get that section done. That was the last day, was going through there.
Awesome. And so let me ask now, what was it like for the last 100, 200 meters of the run? What was going through your mind? Were you just thinking, why is this taking so long? Or were you just, what was going through your head at that point?
Yeah, it's neat. So the section through the park is almost the end of the trail. Like I think once you come out, you might have 10 kilometers, maybe less than 10 kilometers left, something like that. There's still a bit of ruggedness, but then eventually you're sort of getting into like Tobermory, like the real area of Tobermory. And we've always done this thing where Jade comes out and runs the last of it with me. So there was a point about 3 kilometers from the end where Jade was able to meet us, and she ran the last 3K with us as well. And which was really nice to have her with us. And yeah, you come out of the last bit of trail and you actually sort of run down one of the side streets of Tobermory. Then you turn down and you run to like the harborfront walkway, and then you run down sort of this stone pathway to where the cairn is, which sits right in the harbor up in Tobermory. And it was really neat. There are a bunch of people up there to support and cheer me on that last stretch. And yeah, it was a neat feeling to be running in there and experience that end point, and to make it to that cairn and touch the cairn for the finish.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. So Steve, we're kind of getting close to the end of our time here, but I just want to ask, like, any final thoughts about the experience or about, the support you had from the people out there that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, like this truly made me realize that if you can put yourself out there and sort of shoot for something that's so far beyond, and just show that you're willing to go through what needs to go through, people in the universe will rally around you to help make it happen. And I think that's something we all need to realize. Like, you can't do something like this alone. It's just not possible. But if you go out and put the effort in and show up and try to do it, um, the universe and people will rally around to help make it happen. And that truly happened with this. Like, we could probably spend another hour of me just telling you about all the people who showed up and did things for us to help us get through this.
Yeah.
Simple things from just bringing the crew water out in the middle of nowhere when they were out of it, and to the people who got the RV back for us and gave us a trailer for the last 3 days. Like, these little stories that are like so huge. So that's probably one of the to experience that. And I've heard other people talk about that type of thing, where if you put your true self out there and go for something, the universe will conspire to help you.
Love it, man. Good stuff. Good stuff. So if people want to kind of learn more about you, or even kind of get some more insights from your experience and what you and Jade are up to, you have an Instagram account. It's Fear No Trail, and no is spelled KNOW. So Fear No Trail. And that's the same spelling for your website as well, fearnotrail.com. Are those the two best places that people can kind of get in touch with you and learn about your story?
Yeah, those are the two best places. And yeah, we're going to be doing more stuff like this. We're not going to do anything quite this big for a little while, but we already have some other some things up our sleeves we're going to be doing. On Instagram, I'm going to be sharing some of the stories of like what I experienced on the trail over the next little while. So if people are interested, they can find it there, and I'll be telling stories. And yeah, just stay connected with us and what we're up to, because we do have some other cool stuff planned that we're going to be doing.
Wonderful, Steve. I'd love to get you back on the podcast and we can talk about those things when the time comes. That would be awesome. For everybody listening, we're going to put this interview up on our YouTube channel as well. It's just Trail Tales ARP. And beyond that, you can listen to us wherever you find any major podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, all those places. Steve, I have one last thing to say to you, as I say to all of my guests here, and that is to run wild, my friend. Run wild.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to running wild in a few days.